We want to thank you so much for participating in today's webinar. We're happy you've joined us, and we're very excited to begin today. I'd first like to introduce myself. My name's Kim Bullivon. I'm with marketing with the COSTARS program. And we also have here today Felicia Campbell, and she's also marketing manager with the COSTARS program. And we're here today to discuss communication solutions. Communications is perhaps the most important aspect in serving our clients. We communicate constantly through speech, written communications, and even facial expressions or body language. Humans are constantly receiving messages, so we thought it would be important to explore communications to help you create effective communication strategies to ensure your message is received and your recipient understands and acts on the message. As you create a program or a new service, how will it succeed if you don't communicate how to use it, describe the benefits of it, and notify potential users in terms or conditions of using the service? How do you craft your message in order to resonate with your intended recipient? What delivery method or methods are most effective for the group you're trying to communicate your content to? Today we have invited Tammy Noor to talk through communication strategies to help us become confident. Tammy is a consultant with over 20 years of experience. She has successfully led complex projects.
Or you want to?
Yeah, but it's okay.
There, okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry. That's okay. We just had a little background noise there. She's successfully led complex projects using agile and waterfall methodologies, dispersed and diverse resource teams, and enterprise-wide software implementations. She is a skilled communicator with experience in communicating messages in multiple formats to various audiences using both low and high-tech solutions. Ms. Noor is also a skilled analyst who can solve problems in complex, highly visible, and ever-changing environments. She thrives in fast-paced settings and adapts well to change using best practices. Tammy is a dynamic leader with solid communication, interpersonal, and motivational skills who has extensive knowledge of all phases of software development lifecycles, project management, and business analysis. Thank you for joining us today, Tammy.
Thank you for having me.
And we will hand this over to Tammy now, and she's going to talk to you about communications.
All right. Thank you. Just real quick about me. And I am a longtime resident of Central PA. And as you've already heard, I have project management and IT consulting experience, 23 plus years of it. I have public and private sector experience going from small businesses all the way to enterprise-wide. So what I want to do today is I kind of want, in order for us to have effective communication, we have to really start, I think, from the ground level understanding. And part of that is defining the communication process so that we all understand what that is and what it entails. Then I want to start reviewing the various communication delivery methods or channels that are typically used. And also there's 3 types of constraints on communication and delivery that we should all be aware of. And finally, there are 5, using the 5 Ys or the 5 Ws and 1 H approach to effective communication and how we can apply that. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. The communication process. So what is communication? Basically, it is a system of sending and receiving information, and it's verbal and nonverbal or visual means. So there's a vast array of how people absorb information. And some of these examples would include, for example, speeches. Some people are better at reading. So great method would be in writing. So you have graphical images such as infographics, maps, and charts. We have signs and signals and behaviors, which are You could be your facial expressions, your body language, your hand gestures. So we're always communicating in some way or fashion. So what does the entire process entail? Well, at a minimum, effective communication, the process needs to have a sender, a message, a receiver, and we have to have feedback. So we're going to start with, we're going to go through this process and we're going to start with the sender. So the sender, what is the role of the sender? The sender is the person or entity that is creating and distributing the message. The sender really gathers and organizes and reports data so that the receiver can interpret and act on it accordingly. They choose the appropriate method of delivery or channels to each receiver. It can also be a person, group, or even a machine that does this. So what we really need to make sure of is that the sender really knows the target audience and where we want to send and the message we want to send them. The second piece of this is the message itself. We have a message that contains information. So what is information? Well, information is really the data that's been sorted, arranged for the receiver. And it should be known right now, and you need to make sure that not every receiver is going to need or have the data presented to them in the same way. So that's why it's kind of understanding your message and how you want to sort the data and who your receiver is. The message needs to contain, it can contain, I should say, individual facts or statistics or really ideas. And we also have to have the goal of the message. So the goal of the message really ultimately, the end result is, are you informing them? Are you trying to persuade them to take action, or are you entertaining? Next piece of the chain here is the receiver. The receiver is the one that actually gets the message from the sender, and they interpret that information. It could be received in a variety of channels. And again, here's some examples of such channels. We can use letters. You can use phones, whether cell phone, landlines. You can do face-to-face, whether that is digitally through Zoom calls or Teams, teleconferencing, but it's still considered face-to-face. And at that point is when we also talk about, or before we were saying about the hand gestures or behavior. So even though we say face-to-face, it could be in person, it could be digital, and there's also electronic means of communication to deliver the receiver would receive that through electronic means. The receiver also needs to be able to interpret the message and respond accordingly. The final piece is the feedback. And this is one I think that sometimes is not considered important most of the time. So a lot of times you'll see where we just send the message and we kind of leave it at that. Well, feedback is the receiver's response to the message. So we really need to pay attention to feedback. And feedback can be a call to action. It could be an acknowledgement, or it could be an observation. So a feedback, if you send an email, for example, and somebody says, yep, got it, working on it. That's your feedback. You know that your message has been received and it's being worked. Another that I think is also not always front and center with feedback, but it's a very important one, could be observation. So you don't necessarily have to have a formal feedback method, if you will. You could just do an observation and record it. For example, let's just say the school board or a parent-teacher organization sends a message to the parents. And when the message is requesting that they attend an upcoming important meeting. Now, depending on how your message was sent or how the information, I should say, was presented, there's a couple things that will happen. So if your message was interpreted as the sender attended, that means that you'll probably see a lot of parents at this meeting. So your observation or feedback would be, great, I got 80% of my target audience is here. Perfect. Or you may have very few or none at all attending this, and your feedback via observation is, uh-oh, there was a breakdown somewhere in the communication process, whether it was the message itself, the goal wasn't clearly defined, the call to action wasn't clearly defined. The whole trick of all of this is to figure out where and why the breakdown occurred so that you can actually evolve for the next time. So why does all of this matter when we talk about the communication process? And that's because understanding this process will make you aware really of what occurs when communications take place, just like the example I gave. So if you knew the communication process and you say, okay, oh, the message itself wasn't crafted the way I really wanted, it wasn't crafted to do a call to action. Or let's say the feedback, there was really no one there to observe feedback for you or provide feedback. So next time you might end up sending out the same thing and get the same result. So by understanding this entire process, right, it also ensures that your message is received, it's understood, and it's acted upon as you, the sender, had intended. So on the surface, really, messaging seems simple, but effective messaging is more complex. And it really entails understanding that messages are influenced by multiple factors, such as timing, sequencing, usefulness, completeness, value to the receiver. And one of the most important is the ability to actually obtain the message and process it. So part of this is really understanding what the modes or what the delivery methods and channels are of different types of communication. So what we're going to do is I'm going to, in this next section, I really want to talk about the modes, the types, and the mediums of communication that various receivers and senders should be aware of. The modes of communication really are two. We have interactive and we have non-interactive. So the non-interactive, there are three types, really. There are one-way, text or writing, if you will, not text messaging per se, but writings. So some examples could be that we see every day are the no reply emails. So you get an email, it's non-interactive, it's one way, it's sent for a specific reason, no interaction, nothing is needed. Other examples could be standard paper. Again, traditional, but still important. You've got PDFs are another one. You've got written broadcast messages are one way. And also another one is taking surveys, if you think about that. Another one-way form of interactive communication is audio. We've got radio, voicemail, you've got music CDs, if you will. You've got podcasts that you listen to, but you don't really interact with. You've got broadcast voice messages, if you've heard any of those. Another is audio-visual, non-interactive. We have your TV. We have videos that you watch. Even motion picture film is an interactive way of communicating. And here's an interesting one that not many people think of, or security video feeds are also considered non-interactive, but it's a mode of communication. So then we can jump over to, well, what's interactive? Well, interactive also it requires a two-way. So you can also do text, and we're talking maybe the simple text messages. You can do chats for two ways. You've got an audio two-way communication. It could be your phone calls, whether it's cell or landline, it doesn't matter. You could do traditional CB radios. You can do parking intercoms are considered that. So if you're going into a parking lot and you have an intercom that you need to talk with the main gate, you can press the button and it's a two-way. We also have the two-way audio visual. And here's an example that some people don't think about it, but if you look at the live social media feeds when people go live, such as Facebook or even TikTok now, is some of those where you've got your social media is the audio and visual of active communications. So to dive a little bit deeper here, we're going to talk about there are 4 main types of communication. We have person to person, and that is really one person providing data or information or ideas directly to another. And this is the most common form of person to person, or type of communication is person to person. And it can be, as we discussed earlier, or digital or physical, such as video conferencing or in-person town halls, press conferences, usually person to person, or the door-to-door would be considered person to person. We also have person to machine. A person is providing information and data to control the machine or the system. For example, in your home, you do this. You can set your thermostat. That is a person to machine. Entering information for broadcast messages. For instance, when you issue an Amber Alert or severe weather alerts, usually that information is input from a person and it's broadcast out through the machines. You can do completing electronic surveys. That's another form. Then we go into machine to person. This is the means of providing information and data to a person through mechanical means. And this could be such as, let's say, railroad crossing signs, traffic lights, security alerts, self-service kiosks is another one. Then we also have machine to machine. This is where your device or system is providing information and data to another device or system that would take that may or may not take action. So, for example, computer-controlled workflow operations is one. And here's one that is a personal experience, which is I have my home printer set up to where if I run low on ink, the printer actually contacts the vendor and puts in an auto order for my ink, and it automatically sends it out and places it. This is what I don't know if you've heard the term, but it's called the Internet of Things. And so this is a very important piece of the Internet of Things. And this example that I just gave you, again, is really starting to get tied into that. Another one is machine to machine could be simply, barcodes or QR codes. You have your scanner, your handheld scanner, which is the machine. It reads the barcode, it translates it. So we really have to understand that there are different types of the communications. So how do we get it? So we have mediums, and this is usually broken down into 3 high category areas, which are modern technologies, it's through traditional technologies, and also rising technologies. So modern technologies really are, we really should say that they're changing so rapidly that what would be modern today actually becomes traditional tomorrow. And some of those could be, for example, wearable technologies. So if we've got Fitbits or Apple Watches or things like that, that is considered a modern technology through wearable. You have your smartphones and speakers. We've got emails. And here's what people were kind of surprised when I said emails. And that's because that's really modern, but it's merging and growing more into a traditional technology. So I put that in there just to show as an example that what's modern today may be traditional tomorrow. We've still got entertainment in here. But with that, we've got our modern TVs are now smart TVs. Some more modern technologies that we've used are blogs and vlogs and social media platforms. We've got tablets now. We have electronic billboards. We've got auto language translators. We have assistive listening and interactive devices. We've got chat bots. And again, we have QR codes. So these are really ingrained in what we would call our modern technology. Traditional technologies, be careful, because what is old, don't discount these, because what's old becomes new again. We have some of these would be landlines. You have fax machines, and just the other day, we actually got a fax. So it's there. Postal mail can still be considered a traditional and used technology still. We have pagers, amateur radios. You can have satellite phones and GPS locators and beacons that are still considered traditional, but they're in use. We have radio signals, which could be the walkie-talkies, if you will, the CBs. We've got traditional print. Newspapers are still, believe it or not, still being printed and distributed. We have traditional billboards. We still have magazines. People still use flyers and newsletters. We still have radio and TV, and some of the traditionals are barcodes. And I said that because barcodes are, QR codes are almost an evolution of barcodes. So I kind of wanted to show you that while it's modern and traditional, modern can come from a traditional, which is made better or improved upon. We also have what's coming, and these are rising technologies. And I'm not going to get into a whole lot of the definition of these, but I did want to show you, or at least let you know about these so that you can become aware of them. And while they're not really in use as mainstream, and they might not be affordable right now for everyone, but they are coming. I've been reading lots of IT magazines and blogs and things, and these are really up and coming technologies. So you've probably heard already about artificial intelligence. We have virtual reality. We have what we call the digital intelligent twin or mirrored environments. We have increased usage of the Internet of Things. We're also seeing a rise in robotics and drones. Yet as far as technology, but it's called mesh networking and multi-party system partnerships. So I really wanted to bring those to the forefront, and you can look those up and research those. They're really interesting pieces of mediums of technology. So understanding all these delivery methods and channels, the types, modes, and mediums, it really allows you, the sender, to choose the best way to communicate. And there's additional factors that are included in this, and it's the intended use, the location, your number of receivers are also important, and your costs. So all of those modes and mediums really need to have all these factors taken into account. So what we've already covered, I'm sure, you've noticed that effective communication is more than just composing and sending a message. It takes into account the entire communication process that you have to think about. We all know that, as we all know, the process is not without limit. No process really is without limitations. And part of effective messaging is understanding what those limitations are, which is why I also wanted to bring up constraints for us. There are three primary categories of constraints on communication and message delivery. And these constraints, it's important to remember that these constraints aren't just limited to the receivers of the information, but also to us as senders. So we have some of the constraints could be geography. So its technology doesn't reach that location, or terrain is unsuitable for delivery. And that terrain could be a physical terrain, or it could be an electronic one. Just think about the geography. Economics, right? So the constraint could be budget constraints on the sender or receiver. So, is it that your agency or your company only allowed X number of dollars to be available for this type of communication? So you might have to work within that constraint. The sender, right? So, or the receiver, for example, if you say, oh, I want to send everything, oh, I want to do a broadcast message out to, let's say, everybody with a cell phone that everybody that has a cell phone in our area. Well, maybe some people don't have text. Maybe some people don't receive them once their data usage is exceeded. So there's some kind of economics and budgets involved in that. The final piece of a constraint, category of a constraint, is the ability, is adaptability. And it's really the sender and receiver, sender or receiver, or both really, are unable to adapt to your communication, one of those communication channels, methods, types, whatever we talked about, due to either policy or law constraints, or the inability to change with the times. So if we say, oh, we want a 5G network, well, maybe somebody who lives way up in the mountains doesn't have that. So it's an adaptability. So it's not just a person's inability to adapt, but it's also either the technology or technical ability to adapt. And these also need to be taken into account when you decide on your messaging or the way you get your message out there. So with all of that said, so we have really talked about, summarized really the communication system. We've talked about different delivery methods. We've identified some of the limitations. So how do you put it all together, right? How do you create an effective message? All of this to be taken into account, right? So where the heck do we begin on all of this? Well, really, what I highly recommend, or what I found as being very successful, is using the 5W1H approach. And it is really a technique or method of asking questions. It's about a process or a problem that you're really trying to reach a resolution for. And there is, this really allows you to encompass and clarify and really frame out your way of thinking so that you can get a lot of different perspectives in your solution. What are they? Well, here they are. So it's the who, what, where, when, why, and how. So the who really is what you have to think about is who is responsible for the tasks and the message. Who's actually going to be generating all of this? What do we want to tell the audience? Okay, where do we want to send the message? Identify your target audience. When do we want to send the message? And it's important with the timing. Why are we sending this message? What is the objective? What are you trying to accomplish? What are your outcomes? What do you want to do with it? And how are we going to tell them? How are we going to deliver the message? So really answering those questions, in order to answer those, the 5 W's, 1H, you really need to do research, planning, and document. And research. So researching is determining the target demographics, if you want, how they best absorb the information, determine what your constraints are, determine the communication mode, type, and medium. What is your expected feedback? Here's where you would also find out the what you want versus what you have. For example, if you want to send out a message using, let's say, your broadcast. You think the most effective way to your message to be received is through a broadcast message. Well, wait, I don't have that. Okay, I don't have that. So then what you could think about is, what do I do to get to that point? So this is really the research is really probably the longest, I would think, in my experience. If you answer all of those questions, then it probably is the most labor-intensive piece of the process. Your planning stage. Well, when you plan, you really need to have your message content. You really need to have the timing of your message. This is where you want to address any constraints so that you can mitigate them if at all, or just be aware of them. You want to this is where you plan your feedback analysis. What are you going to do with the information once you get it, once you get the feedback? And the responsible parties for sending the message. So this is where you would actually start mapping out who does what tasks, what parties. So then your documentation. I am very big on documentation simply because it's a way of communicating so that you can, if you're not available, the next person or the next process, you can take that documentation and somebody else could use it, or you could tweak it for your next one, for your next message. So so to use it, there's different times highly recommend a communication plan. And really, it's a detailed plan from beginning to end. And what it does, it allows you to really map out what your plan is. And it can be as simple as a single page chart or as complex as a multiple page document. Think of like an emergency communication plan. So if you have to communicate any emergency procedures, you would open up a book and you would go down your list. So that is the form of a communication plan. So at a minimum, what your communication plan or your documentation should have is at a minimum answering the 5 W's and the 1 H. And what I wanted to do quick was just show you an example. Here is a simple, what I would call 1-page grid. And really what it does is it has your communication, right? What communication will be used to deliver the information? So for example, underneath it, you have examples here. You've got a team meeting or project newsletter updates. Your audience, who is it intended for? The project team or the general public in the examples? What's the purpose? What goals is it going to achieve? Schedule is the time, is the when, right? How often will this communication occur? The format, how do you want to communicate it? In person, do you want to use interactive or non-interactive? And the responsibility or is it a project manager, project officer? It could be, your marketing department might be responsible for doing something along those lines. And what's really great about all of this, and what I'm excited about here, is that COSTARS could actually has a plethora of things that could actually help you achieve effective communication. So I am closing it with that. And I apologize if there were any questions, but because I was presenting, I couldn't actually see them. So is there any communications or want to communicate? Any questions?
I don't see anything in the chat at this point.
All right, excellent. Well, then, Kim, I am going to give this back to you.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. As we learned from Tammy's presentation, effective communications affect many of our strategies, but also our systems, and potentially has legal considerations. COSTARS members have access to contracts to help them strive for more effective communications through strategic planning, through evaluation and analysis of success. We're going to highlight only the parts of the contracts we discussed today that affect your communication plans, and we will send you these contract numbers in our post-event email for your convenience, so you don't have to feverishly take notes. So first, we'll talk about COSTARS 3. That's our IT hardware contract. That's a COSTARS exclusive contract. It offers a wide range of IT hardware, but also includes items to support multimedia communications and LANs, as well as data communication equipment, which is computer-to-computer communication. Under COSTARS 6 software, you can find communication software. And COSTARS 9 graphic and printing services, equipment and supplies, offers a variety of printing services as well as graphic and web design services and mailing services. And now I'm going to hand it over to Felicia, and she's going to talk about some statewide communications contracts.
So now that you've heard about the COSTARS exclusive contracts, There are a plethora of statewide COSTARS participating contracts that you can utilize in your communication strategy as well. So I'm going to highlight some of them and discuss the scope of each and how it relates to your communication strategy. So first up, we have our Consulting Services ITQ. And within that contract, we have a section called Management General Government Operations. And under that section, we have several subsections. And the first would be the Operations Analysis Services. This section of the contract offers expertise in a variety of operational fields, including but not limited to print and mail operations, as well as telecommunications deployment. Also, under the Management General Government Operations, we have Program Evaluation and Benchmarking Services. You can gain assessments of the effectiveness of specific programs under this contract. These assessments are intended to determine what the qualitative and quantitative costs and benefits are for these programs, and possibly compare these findings to alternate program structures, scaled back approaches, or the outright elimination of a program. The assessments may include surveys and reporting of analysis. So this would all fall under what Tammy was talking about as part of your research. You know, is the program that you're wanting to communicate even working? And maybe that's part of your communication. How is that working for you as the user? Also, under the Management General Government Operations, we have Strategic Planning Services. Here's where you would determine and identify where your organization is currently strategically standing and where it should be strategically positioned over a short and long-term period. Consideration of your organization's environment and realistic capabilities will need to be understood, which ultimately will lead to priority-based resourcing. Next, we'll move on to the Creative AV Production Services ITQ. Under this contract, we have a section called Creative Services, and under that are subsections of Marketing Services. In Marketing Services, the consultant under this section of the contract would help you develop communication strategies, advertising campaigns, and public service campaigns. They would also produce finished advertisements and commercials. They would create, plan, and produce sales promotions and collateral materials such as point of sales materials, leaflets, inserts, catalogs, brochures, manuals, or other similar materials. They also would conduct qualitative, quantitative, and attitudinal marketing research, pre-test and or post-test evaluation, compile other customer research, or provide other marketing-related services. Within the Creative Services section, we also have public relations in this contract. These services develop public relations plans, press releases, news releases, handle media relations, radio and TV media tours. They also would manage events, prepare media kits, and coordinate press briefings. They also would conduct focus groups, which would be a good part within your communication strategy. There are also tracking services under Creative Services. This would include media tracking, online searching, online reporting, email alerting, local, regional, and national tracking. Also under this, we have custom multimedia training development services. So if you have a new process that you're trying to communicate, and you might consider this contract to deliver your message in a step-by-step training. This contract offers e-learning, instructional design, media production, interactive development, and learning management system integration for developing custom multimedia and web-based education programs and training courses. And then lastly, under this contract, you can find various production services, which includes application development services, AV equipment, captioning services, post-production services, producer-writer services, transcription or translation services, video production, and web services. Next, we'll move on to IT staff augmentation services. So this contract is for short-term IT staffing resources. When implementing new system upgrades for more effective communication, you might find that you need additional IT resources to accomplish those goals. And this contract includes skilled staff, and there are quite a few categories of staff under here. I'm only going to highlight a couple that I thought would be more inclusive of our communications conversation today. application developer, architect, which is software developing, project manager, telecom engineer, system specialist, video conference specialist, and voice data engineer. Now we'll talk about our ITQ training services. Under this contract, we have municipal training, which will be beneficial to many of our attendees today. This would provide quality municipal training, on-site, online, webinars, etc., on a statewide basis that's affordable, accessible, convenient, and timely for local government officials and employees to build their capacity and improve their performance and efficiency in meeting the service needs of their residents. So this involves the training of your staff so they can disseminate important information correctly and concisely. This training may involve voluntary as well as mandatory certifications. We also have personnel trainings, and under personnel trainings, it's under communication. There are 3 different kinds of training types. The first is interpersonal. So the curriculum in this section is to provide participants with an opportunity to learn and apply effective interpersonal communication skills and techniques to enhance internal and external working relationships. Also under personnel communication, we have presentation and effective meeting skills. The trainings of this curriculum is to enable participants to prepare and deliver effective speeches, facilitate productive meetings, and participate more effectively in meetings with coworkers as well as the public. And then lastly, under personnel communication, there is curriculum for written communication. So this will enable participants to gain the skill and experience to write with clarity, brevity, and purpose, use correct grammar and punctuation, and successfully edit their own writing, and to competently prepare effective written correspondence, including email, as needed in a professional government environment. Now we'll look at our Master Information Technology, also known as IT Services ITQ. Under this contract, you can implement software to help you meet your goals. This would include commercial off-the-shelf software, modifiable off-the-shelf software services, software development services, subscription-based web application services, or software as a service, which is called SaaS. You can procure all of those kinds of services. We also have, under this contract, IT training, both classroom and non-classroom trainings. So this would be on-site or off-site instructor-led IT training for commercially available IT courses. Also under this contract is integrator services. So as you're creating new infrastructure, you might need an integration solution to make sure that multi-vendor systems can work together. Creation of these information systems may include designing or building a customized application or architecture and integrating it with new or existing hardware, packaged or custom software, and a communications infrastructure. I do want to point out the hardware and software used to provide the integrated solution may not be included in this contract. Those items must be purchased through an existing statewide contract or other appropriate procurement method. This is more a services contract. Now let's look at online legal services. So Tammy was talking to us the other day, and I don't remember that this story came up in today's session, but she was talking about methods of delivery of communication, and there was an important announcement that needed to be made that affected local business owners, and this one organization posted an announcement in the newspaper, and the local business owners didn't see it, so then there was sort of a disappointment on the side of the business owners in the decision, and I forget what the topic of conversation was, but it turns out that it was the organization's policy that that's how they let people know things, even though that message was not getting to the intended recipients. So we wanted to talk about online legal services today in our communications conversation, because you may need to look at policy changes in some of your communication strategies. So within the online legal services, This contract can be used to address those legal questions around change of policy considerations during your communication strategies. And this contract also offers social media monitoring. We also have the PBX and key telephone systems. This contract covers moves, adds, changes, cabling, installation, maintenance, training, and other related services. Then we have the professional broadcast audiovisual and multimedia equipment contract. This contract includes professional video production, editing and post-production, professional digital still photography, digital signage, AV conference training rooms, AV control systems, displays, monitors, and projectors, as well as acoustic and audio. So I do want to point out a little bit of a difference between this contract and that creative AV services contract that we talked about a little earlier. This one is more the equipment side. That creative services AV one is more your services side. So if you're looking to procure equipment, this is where you go. If you are looking to buy services that someone else is going to do your communications messaging for you via their own equipment, then you would use the creative services and AV contract. Next, we have unified communications and voice services. This contract provides unified communications and VoIP telephony services, as well as support for traditional voice services. We also have our wireless communication services voice and data contract. This contract piggybacks off of the National Association of State Procurement Officials contract, the NASPO contract, and that contract is called the Wireless Communication Services and Equipment Master Price Agreement. The services under this contract are available through AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon Wireless. So as Kim mentioned earlier, we will send you this contract information in our post-webinar email. So don't worry if there was something that you wanted to remember and you've already forgotten. You'll get it again from us. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about the fact that you might have shied away from service contracts like these in the past, thinking that they may entail a long-term financial investment, but many of these can be used for smaller form projects. So think about a project or a program that you need to communicate to your users. You could contact one of the COSTARS participating consulting suppliers on a statewide contract and discuss just that one project's campaign. The supplier will teach you the process of creating and implementing a communications campaign. And in many cases, you can use what you've learned in future communication campaigns. So that would be a short-term investment that serves you long-term. So I'm going to now hand this back over to Kim, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about some of our member resources and training.
Oh. Great. So for any attendee joining us today who might not be aware of how to search for COSTARS authorized suppliers, I want to share some resources with you. First, I want to walk you through the Members Training Center. And to locate that training center, you want to visit www.dgs.pa.gov/COSTARS. Once you get there to our COSTARS homepage, then you want to click on the Member Information button on the right, and then click the Members Area button. And that's going to take you to the Members Area. In the Members Area, you will see a navigation panel on the left-hand side of the page. And the second option, or the second link there, is the Training Center for members. You do not have to be logged in to the Members Area to view these trainings. So once you're in the Training Center, you'll see that we've created each training module in 3 different versions: a cue card, that gives you step-by-step instructions, a simulation, and the guided help. We'll choose how to search COSTARS exclusive contracts to see the different versions, and we're hoping this will work out for us. We're in a different training room today, so
let's see if it will go to the internet.
Looks like it's hopefully cooperating. Okay, so we are looking at the cue card version of the training module for searching COSTARS exclusive contracts, and it's probably still loading, but that's what it looks like. And then if you want to look at the simulation of this training, you go up to the top right and click on the little box where it says Q card, and then click simulation. And this is going to run an actual simulation of the process.
Yeah, the reason we wanted to show you this is sometimes the Q card version is a little hard to read, and that's the first one that opens. So the simulation, we wanted to give you an idea of what that looked like, so you could see that that probably is more of the way many people's brains work in training.
And you could always watch the simulation first and then go back to the Q card and copy that and print it out and keep it at your desk with the steps. There we go. So we'll just let it go through a few steps, and then you'll see it just, shows you to click on the members login, and then go to search contracts. So that's the simulation. There's also, in that simulation tutorial, there's an interactive one where you can click as you go through and type on each.
This is the interactive one.
Yeah, the interactive.
So it's the same thing. We won't.
Yeah, we won't.
Time to let it load.
Well, that one's loading really quick.
Yeah, it is.
And then the last training, you'll have to click through it to get it to work, but yeah, that's not going to cooperate with us now. And then the final type of training module is the guided help, and that pops up a little box in the corner of your screen. That's if you're more familiar with the process, and it just shows you as you're going through each step which step you're on. So we'll move on. So those trainings are very helpful. We encourage you to try those out. You may also view a past webinar on program benefits by selecting the Program Resources page on the COSTARS homepage. That's the top button there. And in the event calendar, you'll click on the title of the webinar that we presented in February, or any other webinar you might be interested in, but this is the one where you'll learn more about the COSTARS program benefits, and you can view a demo on searching both COSTARS exclusive and statewide contracts. If you cannot find an answer to a question in the many resources that we have available to you on the website, the COSTARS team is always here to help. The contact info here will connect you to the COSTARS team. So if one of us is not available, someone else is there to answer your questions, and they'll know you've reached out and they can help you. You'll see our toll-free number, it's okay, and our rest of our contact information there, and you will be receiving a copy of this slide deck, so you'll have that contact information.